deep breath in, wiggle up his fingers and toes. I don't want y'all falling asleep on me today. But let's talk a little bit about who I am, get some of the, business out of the way, the various identities that I hold. I am a tenured professor, so round of applause for that. For those of you who don't know, all right? Definitely was a process that we all have earned. It's not given. Also the former Office of Violence Prevention, Trauma Recovery senior clinician. So work with many individuals in this room around violence prevention and trauma and designing these spaces together. What does it look like for our youth in the future of public safety here in the city of Newark? Also a White House consultant, been brought in many, many times to consult around gun violence, around suicidality. A father, father of a 21-year-old, father of a 4-year-old. So pray for me, pray for my back. It's not an easy road, but it is a great one that I love. I'm also a fellow out of the Social Work Futures Lab, a founding fellow. And what this means is that we are constantly looking at the profession of social work from a lens of the future of. So right now, the topic and the hot topic has been AI. A few years ago, it was AR, it was XR, it was VR. Prior to that, we were looking at data information and data security. And what I want us to be mindful of is that despite all these hot items and discussions that's happening, let's always not lose sight of our positionality into this future of what we are co-creating. What we are co-creating. And that's important here because there's constantly a tension between what is being funded, what is hot, and what is not, but not losing sight of who's being left out of this conversation. Which is why my collaboration with Robert Wood Johnson, Health and Racial Equity Fellowship has been so powerful, so important, because we're in community collaboration that whether we're talking about data science or art and changing narratives, it must be in community, must be in collaboration. So this fine young man and his sister, that's me and my sister as a young, when we were young. And I start here when I talk about it. So all this is great, but all this is informed by this. All right. So we arrived in America, like most Panamanians do. We arrived to Brooklyn, Franklin Avenue. And then by way of New Haven, my father found employment in New Haven, and we went to New Haven, Connecticut. And this is actually one of the last pictures I've taken in front of a home in which I felt that there was true community happening, okay? A month after that, we were evicted from this home because universities were expanding into spaces. How many of us have heard that before, right? Universities taking over space and then leaving the people who lived there for so many years outside of that space and no longer be able to afford it. That only happens in New Haven, right? No. Nah, that happens everywhere, right? Okay. So, draw a little bit of a context here. This is the payphone where my mother and us, we spent many days and nights calling back to Panama. Back then, we needed about 100,000 quarters for 1 minute. Nowadays, we have calling cards or WhatsApp, but we spent many time there. This picture in the middle is where I spent about 83 school days in the 3rd grade. And I want to raise that. This is the welfare office, y'all. This is the welfare office where my mother, where I spent translating for my mother 83 of those days. 83 of those school days in 3rd grade. So conceptualize what are the core learning structures that you're getting in the 3rd grade, right? Math, English, reading, all of these core things that you're developing. So how did that shift and change how I viewed myself in school when I came back after 83 days without having, so they were talking, I left talking about multiplication and came back looking at law division. I'm like, what kind of language is this happening? But it was quite a change. And in this last picture, this is actually the location where when my father, who was addicted to heroin, he had left the home, and my uncle stepped up, as my father figure. And when he stepped up, he used to come around and check in on us. And one day, actually that same year, I turned on the news, and to see his face, he was shot and killed right in this location by a law enforcement officer. Back then, when they said stop and I'll shoot, was not a suggestion. It was a reality. And he was killed at this location. And the reason why I center this in context like that, Dr. Rios, what does this have to do with data science? Or what does this have to do with innovation in community? Well, it has everything to do with it, right? Absolutely, because the folks who are researching, who are studying with the community to solve these problems, what lens are they coming from? How and where are they drawing in these coded biases that exist within the data, within the narrative of a community? And what we have to do is begin to first destigmatize and normalize that we, as well as social work, live with trauma, and we have to be very intentional about how we care for each other, as well as normalizing that this is our story is embedded, encoded into how we translate data and stories within our communities that we serve. Now, let's go back to this. So we see, we called here, 100,000 coins, and then here, anybody can tell me what this location is? Anybody know what that is? Take a guess. Yale University, absolutely. What's the distance between this and this? What would you think? A mile, a year, 100 miles?
That's next door. That's the location.
Literally less than 2 blocks. Okay? So less than 2 blocks, you could live in a community where you're over-policed, all right? Live in a community where you have all of this happening, and then you cross 2 blocks away, and there's folks who will never, ever, ever, ever have experienced what you are experiencing. So what does that mean in our position here at Rutgers University? When we think of the work that's being done on campus and the work that's being done off campus. Because Rutgers is Newark.
Yeah.
And Newark is who? Rutgers, absolutely. Right? There's no distinction here into the work that we do, because what tends to happen is that then we create these big divisions that's only 2 blocks away of one world and another world. But how are we solving these problems together? So all of this begins to ask us and beg us the question, how does it shape us, and how do we shape it? How does the experience begin to shape who we are, and how do we begin to shape the experiences moving forward in our community? And this is I like to consider myself an engaged scholar. So for those of us who are familiar with what engaged scholarship is, some of the information may seem they're very familiar, but for those of us who do not, it's this. It's being able to, it's an individual who uses their expertise to address societal issues. Not just a practitioner scholar, right? Because you could begin to practice and then say, all right, how does this practice make sense from theory into the work? But no, we need to go beyond that and say, is the work that we're doing and what we're learning actually creating impact into the communities that we're serving? Engaged scholarship. That not just the collaboration happens in the ivory tower, but the collaboration needs to happen with community. That it's just not enough to give them research credit with a font 9 at the end of your report. It's to make sure that when you're writing that publication, and the community members who were doing the work, who engaged them, they need to be first author.
Come on now.
Maybe y'all not hearing me on that.
I hear you.
So what community members are the ones who are teaching you, walking you through, this is how it is on my block. No, Dr. Rios, it's not this, it's this. They deserve first authorship. They deserve all the credit. How dare we go into a community and act like we're the ones who created this framework, when in fact the framework was given to us because those who are closest to the problem are closest to the solution.
Yeah.
And that's when we begin to really understand that all of these things are through a design justice lens, that we have to begin from the beginning, intentionally design what it will look like to have equity, the distribution of power, the distribution of diverse voices into all the spaces that we consider around research and design around intervention-based studies. And we're going to get back to this in a minute, but I want to talk about this fine gentleman here. Be already nodding your heads, right? How many of us know who this person is on the screen? Some of us, all right. Beautiful, all right. So, I always love to talk about this person, Robert Moses. He's called the man who built New York City, okay? So, he's probably the invisible hand behind how New York City became New York City, all right? How many of y'all ever seen this? Right, you ever wonder how we got this? Well, this is how we got this. So Robert Moses had intentionally designed low-hanging bridges in certain spaces, like Brighton Beach, certain areas where you get to Jones Beach, created a highway that crashed through the black community in the Bronx to create the Cross Bronx Highway, right? But why did he create low-hanging bridges? Right? So, what types of vehicles cannot pass low-hanging bridges? Trucks, exactly. Buses. Who takes buses? So who? So again, was it by design? Who is it keeping out of these spaces? Who is it keeping out of these spaces? So before this guy, we didn't have low-hanging bridges throughout Manhattan, throughout New York City, throughout parts of Baltimore. Hold on, all right? This was a process and a practice that was repeated in many black urbanized communities that took a page out of Robert Moses' book. And that was by design. Meaning that if someone was able to design us out, it is only by design and intentional design that we put us back in and ensure that anything in the future has a distinct preferential benefit to those who are most impacted. So if we're ever designing an institute and research, are we truly centering those who are most impacted? Are those voices in the space and in the room when we're coding, when we're designing the research, we're creating interventions, and so on and so forth. So it means that we need to learn how to shovel the ramp. And I love this illustration here. You might have seen it before, in which on this side, you can see, I imagine that there was a snow day. I used to love snow days back in the day. I used to stay at home and make a big bowl of Captain Crunch. And the next day, what you see is a group of students here waiting to get in, and there seems to be a staff member or someone in the school shoveling the ramp. And on this side, we have another student who appears to be in a wheelchair, and he says, well, can you please shovel the ramp? Could you please shovel the ramp? He says, yeah, all these other kids are waiting to use the stairs, so when I get through shoveling the snow, then I will clear a ramp for you. All right, so all these other kids over here waiting, but then the young man answers, but if you shovel the ramp, we will all get in. So often you think of, oh, well, I'm helping the majority out. Right? This impacts those numbers of the majority. But when we begin to center the needs of the most impacted, the most vulnerable, everybody begins to get it. That's what equity means. That's what inclusion means. It means that from the data, from the moment we start constructing this research agenda or this research question, we need to begin to say, how are we not thinking about just the majority, but those who are most marginally impacted, and begin to shovel the ramp. So, if anything, out of today's conversation, because this is a conversation, y'all with me, right?
Yeah.
This is a conversation. So, if anything we're able to take away from this conversation is that when we begin to ensure that we consciously and intentionally design in the most marginalized and forgotten people in our community, we are able to begin to shovel that ramp. And we could create equity for all. So I ask you, how are we co-designing this in our work? I want you to take a second and think about, how am I co-designing with the future of marginalized communities? So think about the folks you work with, justice impacted youth, begin to sit, what in ways am I co-designing? Right? Because in order to build this future, where AI truly support justice, we have to make sure that the experiences and the voices are included. So when I say the experiences and the voices, what I'm talking about here is that the narratives and the stories of those who are working with us has to be told as well. That it's just not one story, it's not a single narrative of the work and of what we consider to be the outcomes of our research. Because I firmly believe, and this is the start of our lecture, this is the start of our conversation, that technology will not save us.
No.
Right?
Right.
Technology will not save us. We have to save ourselves. So all these products that are being designed for us to make our lives easier, are they intentionally designing us in with the thought process? Nah, right? So I'm gonna share with y'all a story I really haven't shared before. So I do a lot of consulting, and some AI companies bring me in. There was one particular company, who shall remain nameless, creating an app to help women track their menstrual cycles. And they say, Dr. Rios, we love the work that you're doing. Come on in and sit on our board and give us some consultation. All right? So I was like, all right, this well-known company, and came in to see what this is about. So when I sat there in this beautiful space, looking around, this beautiful table, how many women?
We're there.
How many women
We're there.
were sitting at this table? Y'all want to take a guess? How many of y'all think it was 5?
No.
3,
Two.
2,
I say one.
1, 0.
I already know.
Not one woman was sitting around this table for an app that's going to tell women how to track their menstrual cycles.
Yep.
Not one. I mean, unimaginable, but for those of us who work in the spaces, it's not unbelievable, right?
No.
Now, what is my role?
Whew.
Yeah, with me? What is my role sitting there with a check on this side? Right? Seeing what I see. Know what I know. Being who I am.
Yep.
Right? So, all this, Dr. Rios this, but when that check is on that side, how do I show up? How am I choosing to show up? So I decided, I made a very clear statement. I'm not your person. I am not your person. And guess what? I know someone who is. And I passed that check back, made a phone call, and I brought someone else in. Because those are the moments that begin to really test are you really 10 toes down?
Come on now.
It's all good to sit up here, have this conversation on this side.
Hmm.
But when you got,
Check. Just a whole nother question.
listen, daycare ain't cheap. I told you I'm a 4-year-old, right? Daycare is not cheap. And you really gotta take a hard look in the mirror. And that's why it's important to work in community, because if I'm not your person, I know who is. And I'm bringing you with me. Because that's how we work in community. And a lot of the work that we are doing must be in community. So, okay, so we're gonna get some of the general stuff out the way, because I don't ever assume who's in this room, all right? We're gonna have some overarching conversations that we're gonna drill down to specifics, and then we're gonna have some really good conversations. And a lot of what I'm gonna be discussing today is actually information in which we shared with the community members and some of the projects and works that we'll be working on. So when we think of what is AI, I mean, a lot of us know what artificial intelligence means, but I'm gonna give everyone a really quick definition that you will take with you forever, all right? Data and math equals artificial intelligence.
Okay.
Anybody ever ask you moving forward, what's AI? Don't give this long explanation. You have to sound fancy. Data and math is what we think about when we think of artificial intelligence. And this is what I tell the communities that I work with, that we have to understand how math and data work so that way we can we get to really understand what AI does and is and how we exist in these space. This year I had the pleasure of working with Yale University School of Public Health. This is my sister, this work, Dr. Jomo Para, and we created a program which was an NIH-funded grant in which we identified young people from Patterson, North, and East Orange, and we brought them all together. Some Patterson folks in the house, P-Town. So we brought them together and we taught them, educated them rather, on how to utilize and learn data science to collect data about the community around sexual health and substance abuse. And they learned how to code, they learned how to collect data, but also they created campaigns about how the language is being used in the community to make sure that peers their age had the language and understood exactly what they needed in order to engage with whatever programming or prevention methods or models. And that means that the language learning models that they were utilizing and scraping from through Reddit or social media, they had to have localized, nuanced understanding of it so they could help code the data. Okay? So for those of you familiar with it, so if you're using training models and we're taking information from the city of Patterson, for example, and we asked Patterson, well, how do you feel about sexually transmitted infections? Based upon what's being said throughout all of social media, we have to scrape all that data, go through all that data, right, and help code it. This is what we consider to be human in the loop. A human is in that loop to help code. So these young people were going in there. So, for example, if I say easy, those Jordans are dope, right? Okay. So if an AI is up to its own devices, it's just going to use what dope looks like all across the world. But if we use this context in a very nuanced way, we have to be able to code it in the right way so it doesn't create misinformation and miscoding in the data in regarding the data representation. You are with me?
Yes.
All right, beautiful. So they were able to really drill down and they found out how culture was being localized around sexual health. And they created campaigns, utilized generative art, utilized storytelling, so they could use the data to inform how they would be able to present the information to the community. Powerful. So they learned about, and I was overseeing the data science educational piece to them. So it's my job to be able to translate these complex, sometimes complex concepts into how does it make sense for me today. So whether it's what is AI, how does it use every day, machine learning, natural language learning processes, computer vision, and really educating them on how it's being interacted with it on a day-to-day basis. And then more so, how does it impact the community in which I live? And then more so, how do we utilize this to create change on my block today? So we work through how input happens, how it goes through the learning language models, and allow it to perform tasks, and they were able to go through this exact process. So one of the questions that we asked them, and this is one of the examples, which is, I asked the youth from Patterson, the youth from East Orange, the youth from Newark, Jersey is a blank place to live, right? So Steve, what would you tell Jersey is a what place to live for you?
Expensive.
All right, how many of us would agree Jersey's expensive? All right, so we're looking at about 40% of the room. All right, what would you say Jersey is a what place to live?
I would say Jersey is an innovative space to live in as a technologist, if you want to develop something new.
Beautiful. Jersey, innovative space if you're a technologist and want to develop something new.
Yes.
Right? Now, I don't know, I'm not going to use shoulder hands for this one, but let's imagine there was about 20% that agreed to that. Which of these narratives is more commonly told when we think of New Jersey? One or two?
Two.
Two, absolutely, right? So how does that happen? It's by design. Who intentionally is able to undesign that into it? How do we design that out? Because every one of us here today represents a different part of beauty of New Jersey, beauty of Newark. Because many of us don't even know who live in this community or work in this community that we're at a 60-year low in crime.
Yep.
This has been the lowest in 60 years. But if you ask somebody in Scotch Plains, you're going to go to Newark, what are they going to look at you and say?
Nah.
Although the data and the narrative doesn't support that. So when it comes to what we were educating the students on is this is how language learning models work. Therefore, we have to be able to also modify the temperatures of these algorithms so it could reflect what's actually accurate and not these biases that exist. Judge Pratt, I love you, good to see you. And that's when we began to also utilize what we consider to be generative AI. And this is what we're going to move into when we think of storytelling. So we think of the stories that are being told. Now, if we hear it, how do we see it? So with generative AI, we're looking at how AI can create these new context, content, text, images, videos, etc. And really based on how data gets poured in, as data gets poured out. So, look at the people in the hub. So over the summer, we were able to work together with people from the hub. So shout out to Monique and Easy, give them a round of applause. Can y'all stand up for a second, please? Please give them another round of applause. Because none of this doesn't happen without them. All right, and I'm going to take a little detour from the talk to be able to highlight how and why. So Dr. Juan Rios, with his lived experiences, his background, and it does not mean that I had full free access into all parts of Newark. All right, there's levels to this. There's levels to this. So credible messengers who understand and know the community, not just from overarching city, but block by block looks very different. And it's not just going into a school, here you go, here's some material. It's how do I engage and collaborate and build trust with the people who are closest to getting trust from our most marginalized and impacted young people. Okay? These are the youth that are often forgotten about. Not often, are forgotten about. Okay? They've already accumulated multiple records. They've already had engaged in lots of activities that we'll leave at that. Okay. So we were able to collaborate together in an organization called The Hub. It stands for Helping Us Become Better Arts and Trauma Recovery Center, which focused on providing healing and life skills training to the most marginalized justice impacted youth. So if a youth in the city of Newark was arrested for prostitution, arrested for stealing cars or gang activity, so if there's a curbside adjustment, we're saying, you know what, instead of sending them to prison, what we're gonna do, we're gonna send them to The Hub. They're gonna see Easy, they're gonna see Monique, and they're gonna work together with them to help them move forward and change their lives. And we utilize these theories. Okay, so our IRB project that happened over the summer, we were able to utilize these theories, which collective efficacy, which means that if we together believe it, that things can change, things will change. 1. 2, future selves theory, that when they are able to create the generative AI art, that they were able to see themselves in the future, that it can happen. So if I never lived outside of my city block in 4 blocks, can I see myself aging gracefully? And lastly, liberation health, which means that we also have to intentionally fight against the policies that create oppression within our populations and people equally. So we were able to work with justice impacted youth between 16 to 24 years old. We utilized healing circles with the staff members. We were able to begin to have conversations around positive self-theory. And it was able to do is, 1, create community before we moved into the work. And what was important here is that we also provided skills training. So either through the work of Midjourney or Crayon, we provided skills training to them directly on being able to use these platforms, not just for this project, but for their own entrepreneurship. So they were able to create t-shirt businesses, I have ideas for t-shirt businesses, ideas for their album covers, ideas for all different types of artwork that's possible. Okay? Which meant that in community, right, with the collaboration of our facilitators, they were the ones who were leading this. Because me by myself in that room, I could not do it. It had to be with them. And what was most powerful and most important, it was the activity that we did. And one of our facilitators created an image of himself graduating from business school, right? But you know what was the most powerful? Is that the young people said, you know what? I never knew that was something you wanted to do. That was something that you could do. If you could do it, that means I could do it. That if you could do it, that means I could do it. So with the use of generative AI art, it changes the discussion and around what's possible amongst us, not just me, myself, but collectively, we began to see what could be possible. They created spaces. So we said, what would you like to see in your city? How do you see spaces that you want to begin to inhabit in the city of Newark, where you live in the West Ward? So they began to imagine swimming pools. See these beautiful pools? What's interesting about that? Do we have Olympic-sized pools in the West Ward? What's the narrative that there was more public pools in black communities than there is today, back in the 1950s, than there is today? By design. I'll go a little bit further. We'll talk about another project that we did, which is how do we create possible futures. This is the Office of Violence Prevention, Trauma Recovery. So we work together with an organization called One Hood. All right. So One Hood is an organization under the city of Newark in which they've identified returning citizens who were the most at risk to create recidivism, the most at risk. So these individuals, we're talking about shot callers, we're talking about individuals who have a lot of influence in the community. So rather than waiting for them to do something, what we did is we were able to engage them in activities. So under the Office of Violence Prevention and Mayor Keisha Uri, again, working with them and providing them to be credible messengers. And one of the projects that we did is that they said, well, how do we create a safe space here in this building in Precinct 1 in the city of Newark that they were also arrested in? And now I work here. And they created this space here. They said, this is what I envision a place of rest to look like for me, where I work. Another question that we asked is, how do you envision, if you were to create a monument of the future where substance abuse no longer exists? This is what they created. And they said, this is what I will create in the West Ward. A monument that we can see that it's possible where substance abuse will never no longer be a problem. Ask them, what would it look like for you to see rest? And for them to see themselves as black men resting and peacefully on their block was transformative. I never thought I would see myself and be able to be on my block resting. Because black men are often not taught to rest when I'm fighting against so many things that's happening around me. And it began to change my conversation narratives of what's possible, about aging gracefully. And we utilize these tools not only for therapeutic purposes, but we get to utilize these tools also for entrepreneurship purposes. That many of them, or one of them in particular, said, you know what? Well, I want to write a book. So I just write a book. I want to write a book about my block, for a children's book, where animals come together to work together for the betterment of their ecosystem. And despite we have differences, that we can't work together. That the Avon Avenue squirrel, Springfield raccoon, this wasn't my story. So we named them and created a children's book. And guess what? This book is now created and utilized in some of the schools in the city of Newark. So we're talking about a person who was recently incarcerated, released, a returning citizen, talking about violence prevention through storytelling, and has the opportunity now to do two things. One, supplement their income, and two, create impact and change with youth. So how do we apply this learning? So whether it's with the young people at the Hub, or with Yale University students, projects with Patterson and East Orange, or whether it's with One Hood, all of it is geared towards ensuring that we first think of this ecosystem of what are we providing in regards to value to their everyday lives. That folks don't care about, oh, well, is this chatbot plagiarizing this? I want to utilize this to provide more time with my daughter so I can send it to court. I want to utilize this to help me rewrite my bio or resume. I want to utilize this for my probation officer to give me more time because I need to work late at night. My landlord is not giving back my security deposit. How can I put language behind this to make sure that they know I need to get my security deposit back? Make it make sense for everyday language, everyday use. And then we can begin to talk about, well, gaining that confidence to move into what's next, whether it's data collection, or whether it's coding, or whether it's being able to properly code the language models and training data sets into where it needs to be. Because within this ecosystem, we all matter and work together. So we have the frontline workers, the folks on the front line, we have the visionaries, we have the builders, we have the weavers, the healers, the folks who are really good with the spreadsheet. We need them too. Because all of imagine when we think of liberation, that we don't work in these silos. So the days are over in which community work, academic work, research, data science, interpretation, it cannot be done in silos. It must be done in collaboration and collective. And this really follows the work of Deepa Iyer when we think of equity and liberation in our community. So if we truly are looking at change, if we truly are considering how can we solve these wicked problems, we must consider that collaboration has to be centered. Because for those of us who are in this room, our students, they're going to be working in the year 2053. This is not that long from now. Our students in college right now will be working in the year 2053. What does that future look like? What does the city of Newark will look like in the year 2053? So how are we educating the minds of our current students to create this future? Are we educating them cross-disciplinarily? Are we educating them to create preferential benefit to our community and those most impacted? That means we have to evolve together. We have to be courageous, accountable, commit to discovery, and have empathy for our future selves. Because we have to balance a sense of urgency as well as being able to make sure we thoughtfully move together collectively. Because regardless of how how AI begins to grow and develop, social justice has to be at the forefront of all the development. That we have to shovel this ramp. Thank you.
No, thank you.
I also provided, I'm so sorry, Dr. Payne, I also provided some recommendations in regards to the works that has been referenced here today. I'd be more than happy to share any of the slides. Dr. Payton, you have it as well, so anyone wants to read further about the work we're doing in the city of Newark. There is an IRB study that we're still finishing the data on that we've just really, when did we finish this? When did we finish our lesson? About a month ago? Yeah. Okay, so we're almost 2 months ago. So we're compiling our reports and getting all the data in there for us, the IRB study. But once it's out, I'll be more than happy to share a lot of information collectively. Thank you.
Thank you. So, we're not done yet. We have about 10 minutes, so let's open it up for Q&A.
All right, my favorite part.
So Muhammad has the mic. Let's not be quiet. A very, very thought-provoking presentation. So questions, please.
So thank you again, Juan, for your presentation. I just admire you so much, and I'm so grateful for you as a mentor and as a friend. I do have one question, because I love how you advocate for more cross-disciplinary engagement. And so I always wonder, like, you know, when you ask another professor to come and like speak or invite them to do like a guest lecture,
Right.
you know, you're basically asking them kind of to do free work, right? And so how would you say, like, how do we get to that place where we can do more cross-collaboratory work? And what kind of support systems do we need to make that happen?
Yeah. So, oh, I'm sorry. Okay, it's a great question. It's a great question. So, I'm gonna lead with this. So we were talking about this earlier, social work. What is the future of academia? And I want us to think about that. What is the future of academia? How are we designing this? So is the future of academia to continue a system in which we're really pitting against each other and positioned around egos, and right? This is sort of what we think of in most academic spaces. It's not created to cultivate relationship that starts here, right? And I think that's important to first start with, because I intentionally try my best to rewire sort of what's imprinted in these spaces about how we should and should not show up together in community, because it's designed that way. It's designed that who is first author gets most credit, who publishes, even if no one reads it, 100 versus 3, where you publish, what journals, what type of intervention you're doing. Is it metadata analysis, or is it intervention-based or community-based participatory research? And it creates these divisions. So I start first by being able to say, one, that we have to begin today to shift how we meet each other in regards to, from a loving space. I celebrate you. I celebrate your work, and I do that every time I'm asked to present, and then I'm going to be careful that doesn't breed resentment because I'm doing it for free, right? So what I say here is that these systems that are there, we first have to deconstruct them in how we view them, and then two, it's our leadership to make sure we're supported to be able to say, hey, this is how we're going to create equity. And I'm going to share this with a little story that I hope you don't mind I share. So when Dr. Faye, Natalia had reached out to me, it was like, okay, send us your rate, right? Now, I very firmly believe in transparency. So I said, all right, this is my rate. 3 days later, she was like, that's not enough. This is what you're going to get. How many people do that? No, give her a round of applause. How many people do that? How many people do that? But that's from leadership, right? Because we know who controls the budget, all right? And we know when, she could have said, all right, cool, I can save me those coins and put it towards this. But she said, nah, we need equity here. If we pay so-and-so this, you're gonna get that too, right? And this is how we begin to really shift culture. So seeing that as an example, it was, and just word today, corrective. Because so often you get negotiated down. And I hope that was just a very brief example as to how it can happen, which is, one, there's the interpersonal that exists, there's the intrapersonal that we have to shift, and then there's the designing out of that past. We cannot utilize yesterday's solutions to solve today's problems. And I think that's where the innovation piece comes in.
We have time for one more.
Oh, I'm sorry. I said
No, it's okay.
I'm here too. We can still talk.
Come on, one more. This one right here. Oh, okay.
She behind the wall.
Oh, behind the wall.
Hi, is this on?
Oh, there it is.
Hi, thank you for sharing your presentation. It was really interesting to hear about the kind of work you're doing. A little bit about me. My name is Katharina. I'm a current student here at Rutgers. And I wanted to ask you, when it comes to the work you're doing with youth, how did you assess programs and activities that would accurately help their needs?
Right here. I'll be honest with you, right? Mike Tyson has this great quote, is everybody has a plan until you get punched in the face.
Okay.
I love that quote, because you're gonna walk in, you think you're designing, you say, oh, word, I've worked with youth in the past, I've done these type of things, I've read all these studies that exist, and the data shows that, and here's what I'm designing out. So I said, well, I'm gonna give you a real life example with the hub. Right here, right now, this is the perfect example. I said, Monique, my proposal, this is how we're gonna do this. This is gonna be an X amount of week sessions. This is what we're covering. We're gonna cover how to define AI. Then we're gonna cover AI ethics. And then we're gonna create workshops together and talk about how this impacts me and write stories and do these together. That's nice, but the reality is this is what the youth need right now.
Yep.
You need to pivot, Juan. Your sessions 1, 2, or 3 need to be sessions 8, 9, and 10. 1, 2, or 3, you need to talk about cars. 1, 2, or 3, you need to talk about logos and music. 1, 2, or 3, we just need to sit here and you need to get to know who they are and show up and bring food at that. And right? And this is the food you need to bring. And this is how you need to incentivize them. But if I didn't have that relationship with Mo or Easy, then I would have missed that. And that engagement would have dropped off, that melt in regards to engagement would have dropped off to 0. Right? So my answer to you is that the engagement piece doesn't happen as one-offs. It's partnerships. So when you work with communities in any research capacity, you don't just show up at the time to do your IRB. You should have been there 2 years ago. You should have been there 3 years ago. And you gotta still be there. So when the IRB study's over, where you at next week? And I don't mean physically, I mean in community. The first thing I said, listen, what you doing today? You need to come here. Because it doesn't happen in more. Partnerships are partnerships. And the ones who are most closest to the buy-in are the partners that will help you how to design your research in collaboration. And you may have to pivot, and you may have to allow room for flexibility, and you have to allow room that things are just gonna be the way they are, and that's okay, because the outcome is more important here than following week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4. And I think that's important. Yeah. Mo, you wanna say something? I see your hand up. I know we're closing out right now.
I didn't really have a question, but I kind of just wanted to assist with the answer on that question. I've worked in communities, I'm from Patterson, so I don't know when Patterson I'm shouting myself out. But when you work in these different communities, you have to understand that you have to go in as like a blank canvas. I always go in to look for the individuals. Like, yeah, I know this is a group of kids that did X, Y, and Z, yada, yada, yada. It's similar to a group that I've worked with prior. But before you even have the thought of like, this is what we're gonna do, is who's really in this room?
Right.
And you have to introduce yourself to somebody that respects them and willing to give them the respect that they're requiring, just so they can respect you back. So just like Juan was saying, like every time I ever had somebody come and speak to any of the youth groups that I worked with, I always look at what they're talking about. All right, this ain't really gonna work with our kids. So how can we make it make sense? Food definitely always works, but this is the food that they like. This is what they actually do, because me personally, I was always the kid that was overseen. Like, oh yeah, she's just regular, whatever. But I always needed somebody to see me. So now I make sure that I take the time so I see everybody, especially the youth, especially the community members that are really in this and trying to figure out how to get out of it.
Right.
Like I'm a middle working class individual and I still have struggles. So I know that I'm looking for somebody to help me sometimes. So how can I best help you without, like how can I best help you? And the only way that I can say that is I gotta put myself in your space. Like I'm coming into your space, but I really have to put myself in your place. So the only way that I can help you is to actually be with you. Let me really talk to you. What you really got going on? A lot of the times that's my first question. What you really got going on? Because they don't want to hear, oh, I have a college degree, I have this, I have that. Because if they haven't made it there yet, or if they don't even know what that looks like yet, or if they don't even understand what that could be, they don't care what you're talking about. It's like, whatever. And they're immediately gonna cut you off. But when you really go in and you give, my favorite word is love. When you really go in and you really show love and you show that you're really here for what you say you're here for, and not just to collect numbers, or not just to meet new people, or to say, oh, I did X, Y, and Z to add it to my LinkedIn, but really just to, understand who you're really serving. Because are you serving them? Are you assisting them? Are you benefiting them? Or are you doing it for yourself? And when you really understand the work that you're doing, you know, like, okay, I'm gonna have to pivot every single chance I get into a room. I have to. If not, I'm gonna miss somebody. Sorry, that's all I had to say.
Well, we have come to the conclusion of the program, but welcome home. And we have a little something for you.
Oh my
So you
goodness.
take it home. I've been hiding that all day, so I'm ready to get rid of that.
What is it like?
I know, right? I've been hiding it all day. So just a little token of appreciation. Thank you for coming home. You're always welcome. Thank you for coming And hopefully you'll come back on Wednesday. We have another one on Wednesday. Wednesday's topic for next week is on entrepreneurship and innovation
Yeah, I'll be-
at the intersection of data science. Let's see what Black and brown people are doing.
All right.
That's what we're talking about. Thank you.